Radio. So we think that maybe one of our presenters, Callum, is having a little bit of difficulty logging in. So we are going to go ahead with the fact that we have Rowan Carroll, who is the director at the Police Museum, and also Maree Brannigan, director at the New Zealand Army Museum, and Windsor Jones, who is a curator at the New Zealand Army Museum with us. And of course, I can see lots of experts in the room as well. So this will hopefully be an opportunity for us to share our practice. And just please be aware that this is an opportunity for us to share practice, but we're not giving, obviously, legal advice. So there is still the onus for you to check compliance with your firearms officer. We will do our best to give you our view on things, but we're not here to give you the final word. Okay. I'm going to start with karakia, and then I will hand over to Rowan. Tēnei au, tēnei au, te hapai nei, te tiri nei, te paupau nei, e tuku reo, mō tuku mana, tō tuku ihi, te māpihi mauria, kia mau, kia ita, haumie, huie, tākie. Great, so that's put us in the right frame for a successful hui. And I am going to hand over to Rowan, who's generously offered her time with us today. Kia ora, Rowan.
Tēnā koutou, e te whānau. Very nice to be here with you all today. I'm going to talk to you about our firearms safety and the way that we look after our collection at the New Zealand Police Museum. I'm going to share my screen so you can see a few images, I'm hoping. And hopefully you can see that.
Yes.
Get that away so I can actually. Oh. Sorry, the toolbar was just in my way, so I couldn't see what I was doing. Okay, so this is about our firearms safety and storage and the way that we do that here at the New Zealand Police Museum. I was very fortunate in 2014 to have a go at recreating all of our collection storage space. So along with that, the armoury was very important, and compliance with legislation was very important for us also. So we had within our storage two internal rooms that were concrete based. So that was a good start for us. One of those we converted into our photo store, but the other one into our armoury. And it required that we have a steel and concrete frame within the actual fabric of the building. And added to that, we put in a metal grating door. So you can see there's actually two doors there, and they both have different locks on them. So for anyone to access through that door, they would need to have both of those keys. We found it really important to separate out our staff, those who need to have collection access and those who don't. So we have two separate key presses with different codes. So only those people who need to know and have access to our firearms, to our armoury, actually can access those keys. So physically it's separated from other areas of the museum, and certainly it's separated from other staff. We put in motion sensor alarms for the inside of the armory itself, but also for the roof cavity ceiling, just in case anyone decided to come in that way. That was an expensive exercise, but the reason we went to that extreme was because you'll recall that New Zealand Police had some firearms stolen from them in Palmerston North. And so to stop that embarrassment and to ensure that we would never be responsible for that kind of publicity, we put that system in as well. So on the inside of the armory here, we got local manufacturers Hyde Store to do these cabinets and also the racking up above the cabinets. So the decision was that all of our small firearms would go into these cabinets. So they're all separately lockable. They all have different locks on them too. So that's just another layer of security there. For our larger firearms, we have tied them to the wire racking on the wall. And we also got Hyde Store to create the brackets that you can see, which take all the weight of the firearms there too. So they're extremely secure. And, you know, for us, earthquake is another big issue in the Wellington area. So trying to ensure that we don't have firearms falling off walls and things. The National Police Armory has a different system. They have rolled racking, and I looked at that before I decided to do it in this way. I felt that there was just too much jiggling around of the firearms and that we needed to make them really tied down and a lot more secure. So as you can see, depending on the length of the firearm, the way that is actually orientated onto that racking there. And for the smaller firearms, they're all nested nicely into the drawers. So we have a capacity for around about 400 firearms in our armory. We actually do need to do some rationalisation, particularly of those firearms that don't have provenance for us. We collect police issue firearms, but also criminal case evidence firearms too. So, you know, there's no standardization at all. In fact, a lot of what we have are homemade firearms. So yeah, in terms of security, we have CCTV on all of our doors. We have motion sensor alarms, which are audible alarms in the armory. We have a key code key press that is separated out from all of the other keys, and only those who have firearms licenses can access that. We have 2 different locks on the door getting into the armory, and all of the cases, all the cabinets in the armory have individual locks as well. So there's loads of layers of security there. All of our firearms are made inoperable by an armourer, and for us that's a lot easier than for everyone else, I guess, simply because our firearms come through New Zealand Police, and we're very lucky. And they will transport firearms to us as well. So again, that security of transporting. But in the past I have had to transport, and I've always opted to drive as opposed to using an airplane. It just makes it a whole lot easier there. So we're not, we don't have a lot of firearms on display, but where we do, we always indicate that the firearms have been rendered inoperable. People have asked questions about that. What does that mean? Every single firearm that's been rendered inoperable can be made operable again by someone who knows how. The only way that you can make a firearm entirely inoperable is to actually cut it in half lengthways. So I don't think anyone would be keen for that. I think it's also really important not to draw attention to the fact that you have firearms in your collection. It's one of those things, there will be a certain element of the population who will find these kind of firearms attractive, and so could therefore potentially target your museum. So keeping all of that on the lowdown, I think, is a very wise idea as well. But anyway, so that's it from me. Yes, so if there's anybody who has any questions around how we operate, I'm more than happy to help and answer those questions.
Thanks, Rowan. Couple of ways to ask questions. I can see that Eloise has her hand up, or just put them into chat and I'll ask them on your behalf. So we'll throw over to Eloise now. Kia ora, Eloise.
Kia ora, Rowan. Thank you for that. That was really, really great to see your storage solution. I had two questions. One was around ammunition and whether you store it in that space and whether you or store it separately, and also whether you treat your antique firearms the same as your other firearms in terms of all being in that space together.
With our ammunition, all of our ammunition is rendered inoperable as well. So we don't have any live rounds of bullets or anything like that in our collection. There are some spent items that we do keep in the armoury, but you know, that's not an issue for us. I would think twice about having live ammunition in my collection as a general rule. And yes, we keep all of our firearms in the armoury. We also keep our crossbows as well in there. Just, you know, it's just that level of danger, I guess. We want to keep them as secure as we possibly can.
Thanks for that. Are there any other questions? One there from Steph. Can you please explain your display storage as the front cover perspex? Is it perspex or glass? And are there security screws? Anything like that would be helpful.
Yep, absolutely. So all of our display cases have got safety glass on them, and they're all framed shut. And yes, they do have security screws on them. They also have reed switches, which are the motion sensor switches. And so if anyone hits the glass or anything like that, it does alarm, and security monitoring pick that up. And generally, we get a patrol car turning up out the front of the museum. So every single one of our firearms that's on display is behind that level of security.
Wow, it's pretty tight security and an advantage of being on the campus with the police right there, of course. There's another question from Joe. Would your records or images of the arms be shared on an online catalogue?
We haven't put any of our collection onto online catalogue for the simple reason that we need to be very careful about curating it. A lot of what we hold is criminal evidence, which has seriously scary provenance. And so for us to put our collections online, we would have to really sort out and take out anything that had that ability to attract that attention, really. You know, I think it's a choice for museum curators and directors, whether they want to advertise the fact that they have firearms in their collection. Up to you.
Kia ora, thanks for that. Another question from Ursula. She's got a question about large guns. They have a gun that's outside that can't be used anymore. Any advice around that? And I wonder if that's like a cannon or what kind of gun, I wonder, Ursula, could you give us a little bit more information?
Probably. I think probably Maree and Windsor would be more able to answer that question, seeing as they have some mighty huge firearms out the front of their place.
Oh, yep, Ursula says it is a cannon. Yep. Maree, Windsor, got any advice about that?
Yeah, so hi, it's Maree here from the National Army Museum in Windsor. Could tag team in with me on answering this question. I do bring greetings from Terence Seymour, who is our curator in our firearms and weapons system. So he would be the go-to person on answering this question, but I did raise it with him in preparation for that. And there's a really interesting point to be made about mortars versus cannons. And so a mortar actually under the law is a restricted weapon, and so you'd need to be confident that obviously it's not a mortar, and I understand that the rules around that are around how the object fires. So if it fires up and comes down, it would be considered a mortar. If it fires direct, it would be considered a cannon. So that's the first thing, is being clear about what, you know, where it sits in terms of its whether it's an A category firearm or a restricted one. And so our tanks and whatnot out the front of the museum, obviously we have quite a lot of them out there. They are category A firearms. So even though they're tanks, they fall into that space, but they are rendered inoperable. Obviously, we don't have things lying around for our tanks to be fired. And so that would be what you would need to be assured of first. As if it is a mortar, then you would need to remove it from outside, because it would have to be treated under the restricted firearms category. So if it's a that's my understanding, and I would encourage you to check that out with perhaps your local firearms officer. And Windsor, have you got anything else to contribute on that score?
That's pretty well covered it, and like Maree said, a mortar is restricted. Cannon is not. So a cannon's outside. We've also removed breech blocks, so they can't be fired. So they're really almost sort of non-museum pieces in a way, because we have removed some items that can't be removed by the general public. So they're more sort of made safe that way as well.
Kia ora, thanks for that. There's just a question from Steph around the name of the motion trip alarm used on the display cases, and Rowan's just answered that with, it's called a reed switch, and it's REED switch, and it's triggered by vibration. So if there's something that you are able to afford, then that's a recommendation for you. Okay, any other questions?
Could I also add, Victoria, on that case?
Yep.
On some of our cases, we also have a break glass alarm, which is set by the sound, I believe, of breaking glass. So that triggers an alarm as well. So it's slightly different than a reed switch, but it is another option that you have that you can put into your alarm system as a break glass alarm.
Kia ora. And also just a comment from Jane McKnight. He says the PIR type alarm is the same kind of a thing as well. So there are a few options there to ensure that your cases are nice and secure, and if any tampering is going to get noticed. Okay, so just been trying to raise Callum to see whether he's able to join us, but no success at this stage. So I'm going to throw it over to Maree. Kia ora, Maree.
And perhaps I'm going to throw it on to Windsor, just to talk about, to give you an understanding around our collection approach to how we decide on what we're going to bring into our collection and how we manage the handling of that when we bring in, I think might be a topic to cover. Thanks, Windsor.
Hello, everyone. If we're getting firearms, then we're very selective on what we get before they come in. If that's what Maree's talking about. So, you know, we adjudge. We have a large collection, but we also judge what we need and what we don't need. So we try to take a representation across weapons that have been used pre-New Zealand wars right through to present day items. The provenance is really important. So we're not just collecting for the sake of collecting. And so that's really important first, that impacts on what storage facilities that you need in terms of the size, and also what you need to in terms of restrictions and legislation that you need to apply to that. Is that what you're looking at, Maree?
Sounds good. And I need to apologise. We were coming on to reinforce and support Callum, so we're anticipating doing a leading role in this presentation. So hence our hot footing on the topics. The other thing I want to add is, and this is my primary advice to everybody, is have a really strong, positive relationship with your firearms officer. That's what really matters in this space, because anything to do with firearms clearly is heavily involved in a legislative framework. So to ensure that you are meeting best practice, that's your first go-to as your firearms officer. Now, I can say also with the museum at the National Army Museum, our whole building is considered a building of stout construction. So we are a concrete steel structure from the outset. So our armory obviously sits inside that, and it has even more layers of security. But that's why things such as our displays, where we've got weapons that are not behind glass cabinet, but say are attached to a vehicle, because it's inside a building of stout construction and it's a category A weapon, then we can deal with it in those ways. So it is about your own context and what you've got and how that fits with the legislative requirements. And so I really encourage you to ensure that you've, the New Zealand Police are here to help. We have a great relationship with our local firearms officer, and it is of a high trust model where we know he'll come and let us know when things change that we need to change with as well. So it's a really, that's my single biggest piece of advice to everybody is make sure you've got a really good relationship in that space.
Kia ora, thanks, Maree. Any other comments, Windsor? No. Okay, I can see that Eloise has got her hand up, and also there are some questions that have come up in chat that we'll go through as well. Eloise.
Thanks for that. This is maybe a question for Maree, Windsor and Rowan, as well as the like the reed switches and things on cases. Do you do anything else in terms of securing firearms actually within the case? We've used like a tether system, but do you have any other recommendations or things that you've done in that regard in terms of internal case security?
Sorry, Windsor. So we normally get an external mount maker to come in. So all of the dimensions of the firearms are sent to whomever that is that we're contracting. And then the mounts are made and they're brought into the museum, and the mounting is done supervised by firearms licensed staff. Traditionally, and it depends what orientation you're going to put your firearm at, but for those that are standing up with the barrel pointing upwards, we have a wire that goes down the barrel and holds it in place. And we have found that needs to be quite a decent length. We have had on occasion firearms move with earthquakes. So yeah, once bitten, twice shy with that. So we do tend to be as secure as we possibly can. But as I say, the real hurdle is the security glass and the fact that it has a vibration trigger on it, and keeping that safe. Yeah.
Kia ora. Thanks, Rowan. Any other comments that you can make, Maree and Windsor?
And we were going to say the same. We tether them where we can, but also we've got mount makers, and different times we put in exhibitions where we've had different mount makers. But the similar thing is we'll look at some of the strength points, and we might use, like, there might be a trigger guard that we can then maybe attach to the back wall. So the mounts we make are also there to add to the security as well, with whether it be a wire down the barrel or whatever it may be, and then that's attached as well. And then try to disguise as much as we can what the mount is, but by looking at where we can support the weapon, but also try to add that additional layer of security. But like Rowan says, those layers of security of the glass, the break glass, your alarm systems, are also there as well. So we have about 4 or 5 layers of security outside of that display case that will enable us hopefully to stop anyone then breaking the glass and then removing. It's all about time and delay. So if you can put as many layers in that you'll delay anyone coming in during the day or even at night, then trying to remove a weapon. So it's about as many layers as you put in will hopefully lead to that weapon not being removed.
Thanks for that, Windsor. Okay, I can see there's a couple of comments in chat that I'll just make sure that everybody is aware of, and then we'll go to Claire or Belle, who's got her hand up. So there was just a question. Oh, actually, just want to say, Ken Mackenzie has given us some really good information around the difference between all of those different switches. So the reed switch is a magnet contact. So when that separates, that's when the alarm goes off. The break glass sister registers pressure on the glass when it's broken, and then there are seismic or motion sensor triggers, which are set off by vibration around the case. So there's a number of different options. So I guess it would just be working out what's the best for your organisation, and also looking at the different cost points of those. A question from Ursula around the difference between the dealer licence and the firearms licence with the museum endorsement, which had been necessary in the past. So the dealer licence, which is answered by Rowan, supersedes the museum endorsement of the firearms licence. So that needs to be in place from today, I believe. There is a slight extension because of our current circumstances. So now's a really good time to get on and fill out that, that paperwork. Question from Henrietta about filling out the necessary forms. Just a comment around that. There are some questions on the forms which feel a little bit, that are a little bit difficult for museums to answer. And again, just going back to that advice that Maree has given us, which is just to form that relationship with the firearms officer, certainly letting them know about the circumstances and explaining any difficulties that you're having so that they can give you advice around how to manage some of those questions. But if anybody has got any comments around filling out forms, and that would be great to cover that maybe in a little bit of after we have gone to Claire. So Claire, would you like to ask your question?
Yep, kia ora everyone. I'm from Toi Tuatago Settlers Museum down in Dunedin. It's actually quite not so much a question as really just reinforcing some of the things that Maree said about the relationship with your arms officer. I've established a quite strong relationship with the Southern District Arms Officer, and we have a system now where they've actually given us approval for a metal mounting system that's been designed by an external contractor, and he comes in every single time we put, for example, a Class A type of firearm on public display. So we now know that that system has been approved by the New Zealand Police, and it gets used every time, but I still, every time a firearm goes out onto the floor, I send them information to say exactly what it is, what serial numbers are involved, how long it's going to be on public display, but they know that the system that we're using has already been vetted by them and approved. And on occasions where we've put firearms out that are outside of the Class A, so whether that's pistols, we've had World War I era machine guns, things like that, I go to them every time and they basically just give me advice and information about all of those other levels of security that might be required. So for us, that's sometimes involved steel plates behind or underneath the areas where mount fittings are being installed into cases. It's involved us having to upgrade particular cases from having perspex to the smash resistant glass. It's involved alarms, things like that on specific cases for specific instances. So it really is all about those discussions with your arms officer and exactly the circumstances. I think it's like Maree said, it's the most important thing really. And the information that you get is fabulous.
Thanks so much for that, Claire. And can I just ask how responsive those firearms officers have been? Like, have you had to wait very long before they're able to assist you?
Mostly it's been pretty prompt, I'd have to say. There was a changeover for our arms officer down here, maybe it's probably almost coming up to 2 years ago, where the person who'd been in that role left, and for an interim period there sort of was a couple of people standing in temporarily, and then a new person arrived. But the fact that all of our information is on file with them made that transition a lot easier, because they knew what we had in the collection. They had the information about those pre-approved mounts. So we've never been delayed in terms of being able to install things by our in-house deadlines for exhibitions. And some of those things have also involved firearms on loan from private individuals, which have required us to get permits to hold or permits to procure for the length of period of an exhibition, and then reverse all of that paperwork at the end as well. So they've been really, really supportive and very helpful in getting through that administration side of things as well.
Kia ora, thanks for that. It's really helpful, Claire. I'm just going to go to some of the chat now, because there's a few more things that have come up, and it's just good that we're all aware of the answers that are there as well. There was one question which was just around our store-bought gun safes adequate for institutional solutions. The answer again from Rowan is, as long as they're robust and anchored, so they can't be easily removed. So it's great advice, and another really nice accessible solution there. Another from Fiona, just around you know, whether it's necessary to hold the dealer's license, because the majority of the collection is antique firearms. Again, I would suggest that in situations where you're unsure, that you contact your firearms officers again, just to check out whether or not there is a necessity to apply for the license. The other
Victoria,
thing
sorry, yeah. Victoria, can I just add on that point? What I understand from Terence is that all pistols are regarded as restricted weapons. So to Fiona saying that you've got a small pocket pistol, I would suggest that just that in itself is an issue for your collection. So I would very much encourage you to check that out, because my understanding is that all pistols are now considered restricted category weapons.
Yeah,
nice one. Thanks, Maree.
Yeah, it just falls within the, it's dated about 1910, and it's the only one of our collection which falls outside of the antique firearm policy. And whereas all of the other firearms that we do have, which are antique, we would have about 27 items, but it's just this 3-inch pocket pistol, which is a curiosity in itself. And I think if anyone tried to shoot someone with it, they'd kill themselves laughing anyway. So if you know what I mean.
Sorry, I muted myself and then had a little comment, which is just Rowan just reminding us that all firearms are designed to kill, no matter their size. So even though they may look dainty, like say, it still has the potential to be a nasty object. So yeah, and just another comment just to say that just check it out with your firearms officer to see if there's a solution for you in that set of circumstances. Okay, so just checking to make sure that, because can't see everybody on my screen because we've got so many people in the room, which is wonderful. Just going to do a little check through just to make sure that nobody else has their hand up. But feel free to jump on in with a question if you have one, and or just kind of checking your understanding of a situation. And I'm just wondering if anybody's got any advice around filling out that that dealer's license paperwork. Any tips on managing or navigating that process? Steph says clear your diary. Alba gives us some good advice, which is just slow and steady, recompleting the form. Thanks, Alba. Another comment from Georgia. Looking for solutions for displaying firearms for small museums who may not necessarily be resourced for safety glass and alarmed cases. Would you avoid displaying firearms without these layers of protection? Or is there
I would.
any advice that people could? You'd avoid.
Yeah, and so would I.
Yes, if I wasn't feeling that we were secure enough and there was the potential that those firearms could be stolen, then I certainly wouldn't risk it. And just added to that, we have additional layers of security in that we have personal panic alarms for our staff as well. And we also have automatic front door locks that we can do remotely if we consider there is any threat coming into the museum from outside. All of these things add up to feeling a lot more secure. I mean, I've worked in museums where, you know, oh, it's just a little old, wherever, tiny little town, nothing will happen here. And invariably it does, whether it's the donation box that's stolen or whatever. So we all heard of situations where we've just thought, no, can't happen to us, it's impossible. But to be responsible for a firearm, to go out into the public forum is the last thing any of us want. So I would, if you can only afford to make your storerooms secure, then do that. And it may be that at some stage you will get the support to actually put in those layers of security for your firearms on display. And then you can bring them out. But until that time, I would be very cautious.
Kia ora, thanks for that, Rowan. Maree, any comments or Windsor?
I just agree with Rowan in that space. As I said, our actual museum under the legislation counts as a building of stout construction. So right from our perimeter inwards, we are well fit for purpose. But we also, with all our alarms, we have floor staff who have pages that are connected to the perimeter, the proximity alarms for all of those areas. So, and we have on-site security guards 24/7. So we've got a whole lot of things that we can be responsive to. And obviously it's not just about our firearms, but it certainly contributes to our confidence that we've got multiple layers in that space. So yeah, I wouldn't be putting something on display that I wasn't confident was secure and compliant.
Kia ora, thank you. I guess just going back from also what Claire was offering was that, you know, if you do come up with a system that you believe to be secure, again, checking it with your local firearms officer is a mechanism that you can use to, you know, make sure that you're being compliant, but also means that you can rest easy in terms of that responsibility of making sure that guns are being displayed with a you know, public safety view in mind. Another, just a really good piece of advice in the chat from Shay around advice for filling out the dealer's license forms is that expect time to speak with your boards and risk and audit committee. So make sure that that's factored into your planning as well. Kia ora, thanks for that, Jay. Luana's got a comment here. Our museum board have decided to remove all of our guns from the building. It's too complicated with the new regulations, and they'll be uplifted in level 2 and taken to the firearms license holders' residence. So were they part of the collection, Luana? Will they be deaccessioned? Yeah, they're being transferred from the collection. So yeah, I mean, that is a consideration that some museums may be looking at. I guess it comes down to the value of the firearms in your collection, whether they are likely to be on display, will then also, particularly if you don't hold many, you know, bear in mind that with Rowan and Maree, you know, there are multiple, well, there are a lot of guns in the collections. So obviously it's well worth all of those layers of protection, and of course, you know, a requirement. But if you have very few and they're unlikely to be on display because they don't add a great deal to the aims of your organisation, then you may need to consider the value of having them. Alba's just shared that Alba's from Motat, by the way, that they've also started a very serious conversation about what we do with our collection, which doesn't support the strategy and the ongoing direction of the organisation. And Ali's just shared that our firearms officer has told us in answer to our questions that you need a dealer's license if you display any firearms. Yeah, and just Rowan's asked, or just suggested that you check that with the police legal team. Okay. Oh, a question from Anne. Who can decommission guns, and how would you locate someone to do this? So if anybody's got any answers to that, that would be really helpful.
You need an armourer to make your firearms inoperable, typically, unless you're well enough engaged to understand how to remove the required parts. Sometimes the things you might just remove, like the bolt or the firing pin, would make the firearm not look as you would want it to in a display situation as well. So there might need to be some other method of doing that. But I think, and actually Windsor, you might be able to confirm this, but you could take them to a firearms dealer or shop to have that work done. But I would ask police in the first instance, so your firearms officer.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice. Check with your firearms officer rather than going to a dealer first, but yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. So again, starting with your firearms officer is that first point of call. We're directing lots of work their way today, aren't we? The question from Wendy around, is there any support available for smaller museums who currently may not have the appropriate resources to store or display? Use the Helping Hands grant. Oh, I think we might have Callum, maybe. Yeah. So Helping Hands grant up to $2,000. Just being aware that at the moment we are a little bit slower in the process, just because we can't get into our building, obviously, like everybody else. But that may help you particularly focusing on storage in that first instance. Oh, and then another question from Anne, just around that decommissioning. Do you need certified proof of that decommissioning process? Just if anybody knows the answer to that. Not sure.
In my experience, the process that has been undertaken, it pays to have the person doing it photographing it, and then you attach that into your collection management system, and that should be enough for police. They will be checking it when they do their annual audit.
Kia ora, thanks for that, Rowan. And just another question here from Shay around how do you control relative humidity inside the pistols case or safe? Any advice around that? Got plenty of collection managers in the room.
We just have an internal monitor in our armoury, and that was the real upside of building a very thick concrete walled repository. It is very, very stable, and so we do just monitor it and just ensure that there isn't any major moisture, and then if there was, we just put a dehumidifier in there. Because it is an internal room, it doesn't have its own mechanical HVAC system. It's just existing.
Okay, that's cool. Good advice, Ron. Thank you. Claire.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the issue of rendering things inoperable. We had to do that in the case of the machine gun when it came in on loan for a World War I exhibition. So at that point, the lender had to provide evidence to the police that the appropriate parts had been removed, and that did include photographic evidence both from him removing the parts, confirming that those parts were at a different physical location, so that he kept those parts, and then the remainder of the machine gun was brought to the museum, and then we had to provide evidence at our end that it was still inoperable at the time that it was delivered, and all of that was documented and given to the police. And just like Rowan was saying, in terms of the environmental control, we have a permanent hobo environmental monitor in our strong room, and that gets checked every month just to sort of see how the environment's tracking. And being that kind of construction, as you were saying, ours in that particular space at the moment is staying pretty constant, so that's helpful for us. And also our arms officer has in the past offered to put us in touch with people from our region who would be able to assist with rendering firearms inoperable. So
cool.
Yeah, it's another good point of contact.
Great, thanks for that, Claire. Rightio. So I'm just aware that we're coming close to end of our hui. Thank you everybody for your attendance. And a lovely comment from Eloise, which sounds like just saying, it sounds like you've got an amazing firearms officer down in Ōtepoti. And yeah, please make sure that you pass on all the positive comments, Rowan, to, to your colleagues at the college.
Y'all do.
Yeah, because obviously they're being really well utilised around the country, which is fantastic because we need the support as we're going through these changes. Now, I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to have Callum on the call with us. Just to let you know that we are working on a blog at the moment, which will follow up from this hui. So in that, hopefully we'll be able to share some of the advice that's been given today, but also a few details around some of those mount making solutions that we talked about earlier. Okay, so just some lovely comments from people saying thank you. So I am just going to close this with karakia and allow you to get back to your other mahi, whatever it may be. Thank you everybody for your attendance, and hopefully we will be seeing you again on another Zoom hui before long, and maybe this one outside of lockdown, you never know. Okay, whakataka te haere ki te uru, whakataka te haere ki te ponga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Thanks everybody, lovely to see you all. Have a wonderful day.